Chandler, Arizona. A young woman uses a tablet to speak.
My name is Taryn. I am 16 years old.
A young woman types on a tablet. The text is converted to speech.
I live in Chandler, Arizona. I live with my dad and mom.
A photo of Taryn and her mom smiling.
I like to go in the RV with my family. I am thankful to be healthy to do that.
Taryn on a sunny day with her parents. Her dad pushes her manual wheelchair. Next, Taryn's parents are interviewed.
I'm Dawn Bailey,
My name is Chris Bailey.
and we're parents to Taryn Bailey. HCBS is Home and Community-Based Services. It's the services and supports that allow us to have Taryn at home with us. Our community that knows Taryn, our neighbors, our friends, our family, they see Taryn and they love to see her out and about. I don't think they realize what it takes to allow that to happen.
Shots of the medication and medical equipment Taryn needs in her home.
Taryn's medical conditions, her needs for full-time care would really require her to live in a skilled nursing environment. Unfortunately, the reality of congregate settings is they're not always great places. There's not always high level of care. So with our Home and Community-Based Services, or HCBS, Taryn gets an array of services. She gets speech therapy, physical therapy, occupational therapy.
My team is full of terrific workers, friends, support, and family. They are important to my lifestyle so I can be happy and healthy.
Billions of dollars proposed by President Biden will allow more people to receive the benefit of HCBS.
Welcome everyone to our Building Better Care in Arizona Roundtable. My name is Ai-jen Pu, and I'm the Executive Director of Caring Across Generations and the National Domestic Workers Alliance. And we are so honored that you could join us today. The video we've just seen is from the Be a Hero Fund and illustrates the realities of daily life for an Arizona family whose teenage daughter has disabilities and complex medical needs. Across Arizona and the nation, many other households also need caregiving options so they can support their loved ones in a way that they choose, no matter what stage of life they are in. In Arizona alone, an estimated 870,000 family caregivers provide 730 million hours in care each year to loved ones above the age of 18. This means family members, usually unpaid, often have left other jobs to fill gaps in our current care system. These families need reliable childcare so parents can earn enough to raise their families and at the same time fuel our economic recovery. They need paid family and medical leave so that they can keep their jobs and preserve their income when caring for themselves or their loved ones temporarily. Families also require more supportive services for veterans and people with disabilities and older adults who wish to remain in the comfort of their own homes and communities, but these options have too often been out of reach. Care is the backbone of our families and our economy, and the pandemic revealed just how little support we as a country have offered. We need to change that. Transforming our care system is both long overdue and incredibly urgent. Every year, 4 million baby boomers reach retirement age. Nationwide, we have 850,000 older adults and people with disabilities who are either ineligible for Medicaid services in their homes or communities, or have been on waiting lists for these services for as long as 5 or more years. As the population ages and more adults with disabilities seek to use our care system, Arizona will need to create 169,000 direct care jobs by the year 2028. Our care workforce is essential to our health and our economy, and yet caregiving jobs offer little to no security. The direct care workforce is made up of mostly women, mainly women of color and immigrants, And on top of the demanding, skilled work of care and support for our families, today they must also contend with the risks posed by the Delta variant of COVID-19. And yet these caregivers are barely paid a living wage. They receive few benefits and little, if any, training. To truly bring Arizona out of the pandemic and toward economic prosperity that we know is possible, we need to change our care system. And we have a generational opportunity to do just that right now. Now is our time. The Build Back Better agenda transforms our care system on a scale that we haven't seen since the New Deal. Its policies serve the needs of all of our population at many different points across the lifespan. It provides childcare, paid family and medical leave, long-term services and supports in the home and community, allowing family caregivers to return to work, supporting quality care for individuals and families who need it, and raising wages and offering training for our essential care workers. Negotiations are underway right now in Congress on the federal budget, and these negotiations will determine how much support this agenda receives. Our speakers here today will explain why it is both urgent and crucial that Congress invest $400 billion in home and community-based services so that all Americans, regardless of our political affiliation, can benefit, because all of us will need to give or receive care at some point in our lives. This is for all of us. I want to thank our co-sponsoring organizations for today's roundtable: Caring Across Generations, the Elizabeth Dole Foundation, Common Defense, the ARC of Arizona, the National Domestic Workers Alliance, and the awesome team of members from these organizations who made this event possible. Now, let's dive into what's at stake for Arizonans as Congress moves towards a decision on funding care. I'm really excited to introduce several Arizonans who can tell us about their firsthand experiences with caregiving and the incredible significance of these services in their families' lives. We have with us today Destiny Prieto, a caregiver and paid leave advocate. We also have with us Ann Atkinson and Bree Shields, fellows of the Elizabeth Dole Foundation, which supports caregiving for America's veterans. Destiny, let's start with you. Please share a little bit with us about your experiences.
Thank you so much. Yes, I am so excited to be here today. My journey started in 2018 when my family was able to go to an event called Strolling Thunder in Washington, D.C. that is through the Think Babies organization. I am such an advocate about paid family leave because when I had my twins 3 years ago, my husband was not able to spend the time that he needed to. We had a perfect pregnancy. We thought we were going to bring home 2 babies, and one of our babies ended up being in the NICU. So we had to make hard choices. We had to decide, do you come home and see one of the twins, or do you go to the hospital to see the other twin? And my husband, unfortunately, didn't have paid leave. So he would drive an hour right after work and go up to the hospital, be there until like 9 o'clock, and then drive almost another hour home so that he could try to spend a little bit of time with our baby girl, Olivia. And meanwhile, I was in the process of going through this horrible C-section experience that wasn't supposed to happen either. So I was trying to heal from a C-section, just had twins, and yet we had to pick between our babies. And no family should have to do that. They shouldn't have to decide whether financially they can take the non-paid time off or go see their child in the NICU. And fast forward, 9 months ago, we got to bring home another bundle of joy, and that was Kingston. And again, I had a very complicated C-section, and my husband didn't have paid leave. And because he didn't have that family paid leave, again, we had to make some hard choices, and he actually had to take non-paid time this time with this baby because I just had so many issues that I had to have someone with me at the house, and it put a lot of stress on our family. And I want to say that one of the reasons I like to advocate for paid family leave for families is because families shouldn't have to pick between being able to bond with their children or care for their children and make financial decisions. That should be just something that they can just ease into being able to care for their kids, being able to be a family, be in that time of bonding. It's just so critical and so important. And it's just such an urgent matter right now in our country.
I couldn't agree more, as so many families are trying to figure out how they can get back to work in this time. It seems just essential and quite obvious, right, that we would need paid family medical leave, which is what you've been advocating for so powerfully. And thank you so much for sharing your story. I'm curious, as Congress moves into this really critical time of conversation about the budget, what is the main message you would like policymakers to hear? What do you think they really need to know about these issues?
Thank you. I feel that Congress really needs to realize that there are millions of families like mine, and they shouldn't be in a position where they have to pick financial stability or being able to bond with their children and care for them. That shouldn't be on the table. They should just automatically be able to move forward as a family, bonding, and not have to financially worry about how they're going to pay their bills. That shouldn't be the case. And I really feel that this is an urgent matter because so many families do have to make that difficult choice. Like mine, we had to make that difficult choice. Even like I said, it was a recent 9 months ago. And I don't want any family to have to experience what we did. So I beg Congress to please look at this. These are real families that need this time to care for their kids and not have to be financially burdened.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Destiny, for sharing your story and for your incredible advocacy. We're so grateful to you and for the courage of your family to continue and to make sure that Congress understands what parents like you are dealing with. I want to bring Bree into this conversation. Bree, your story has a different kind of caregiving challenge to it. Can you share a little bit about how caregiving needs have impacted your family?
Yes. So my journey with the military community started in 2010 when my husband enlisted in the Army. 3 years later, in 2013, he was deployed to Afghanistan, where he was on the front lines and in over 100 missions during his deployment. Upon his arrival home, we knew that something was off, but shortly after his arrival home, my husband's enlistment ended because his contract was up and we moved forward with life. But the issue became that now that we were out of military culture, we were hearing words like TBI, PTSD, invisible illness a lot less. So it was easy to dismiss these early warning signs for some of his injuries that were present. We would say things like, he's just readjusting, he's having a bad day, everybody forgets things, or the weather is causing pain. And we did that for about 2 years until we couldn't do that anymore. About 2 years after his deployment, all of his injuries made themselves very known to us. After 2 years of trying to deal or push aside those warning signs, we had a life-threatening encounter with his injuries that left my husband fighting for his life. 2 months after graduating college and at the age of 26, I became a caregiver. Except for that wasn't true. I had been a caregiver before then, and performing caregiver duties along with working full-time and going to school full-time in the 2 years leading up to those injuries that were now screaming in our face that we could no longer ignore. But just when we were in the eye of the storm, I realized that I was a military caregiver. And I want to note that self-identifying for caregivers is such a need. Many think I'm just the wife, I'm just a friend, I'm just helping with medication or driving to an appointment. And a lot of times doctors will see us in that light as well, instead of in our caregiving roles. Self-identifying for me has been crucial because it means when I self-identify as a caregiver, I can access the care and resources that are available for caregivers. It means that I can be in a community that supports caregivers. And it also means that I can show up to my husband's appointments and advocate from that caregiver angle as well. In the beginning of our journey, I felt very isolated and very alone. I knew no one who looked like me and no one who was walking through the same journey that I was. I didn't know of any immediate resources for my husband and his injuries, or for myself and the support that I was now providing for him. And those are just a few of the gaps that I have experienced firsthand. A lot of my work today involves making sure that caregivers and their loved ones have the resources like the Elizabeth Dole Foundation Respite Care in the beginning of their journey. This is the story that ultimately led me to do the work with the Elizabeth Dole Foundation, and the gaps that I have seen in our community are a lack of resources. I've seen caregivers not qualify for certain programs and then balance the tension of having steady income and giving their care recipient the care that they need. I've also seen a lack of education where people are shocked that my husband is disabled or that I am a caregiver because we don't look like it, whatever that may mean. And I've also seen people very surprised that the military caregiver community even exists. When Senator Bob Dole was in Walter Reed Medical Hospital, Senator Elizabeth Dole was exposed to this caregiver community, what we like to call hidden heroes. And she made it her mission to make these heroes a little less hidden and include our caregivers in the care plan for their veterans from day one. What I've learned from my own experience and the countless experience of veterans and their families is that supporting our military families and caregivers means further quality of life for our veterans. I've seen this cycle happen a lot where a veteran accesses a resource. Their life improves for a short period of time. They enter back into the home where their family is still hurting and not equipped with the same resources. And then veterans go right back where they were before they even access the resource. But if we can support veterans and their families and or caregivers from the beginning, what we see is the progress of veterans actually goes much further. We see families integrate these resources in profound ways, and we see veterans' need to access the same resource multiple times drastically decrease. And ultimately, the resource being offered actually changes lives. So it's important to remember that this is a family matter. Veterans are not the only ones who get wounded when injuries arise. This story I shared with you today, my story, is just one of millions of our military caregivers, and it's important that we continue to bring them in on these kinds of conversations.
Absolutely, Bree. And I know that your voice and your story is helping so many caregivers right now who are watching feel less alone and feel like they are part of a community. And that is so, so powerful. I'm curious, from your perspective, Bree, given all your expertise and all the work that you've done on these issues, how you think your life would improve and those of other military caregivers if we created the kind of caregiving system proposed in the Build Back Better agenda.
Yeah, so the first word that comes to mind and something that I've spoken about with other caregivers is stability. Stability for caregivers and also for veterans. As military caregivers, we are always thinking about what if the other shoe drops? What can I be doing now and in the future to set myself up in a way, and which is most of the time financially, to make sure that if I can't access certain services, I'll still be able to care for my loved one. It means that we can settle in and focus on what's actually important, which is caring for our loved one. It allows veterans to actually focus on their healing instead of what will happen now to my family that these injuries have arisen. And also, it provides individualized care. Not everyone needs the same care, and there are certain injuries that would make it extremely difficult for an outside caregiver to come in and provide care for a veteran in certain injuries. So having the option to either bring somebody in or ourselves get certified as caregivers and be able to administer that care means that we recognize that veterans and their injuries as individuals, and you allow veterans the right to get the kind of care that they want.
That is so powerful. And I feel like what I'm hearing from you and also from Destiny here is there is so much strength and resilience among caregivers. And what we need is the infrastructure to support the basic needs we have to be able to deploy that strength and resilience towards our families who we love and who we want to care for, and towards the economy functioning. I'd love to bring Anne, you into the conversation now and just hear a little bit about your caregiving journey and that of your families. Welcome, Anne.
Thank you for having us here today. Although I'd been taking care of my husband since 2012, I didn't recognize myself as his caregiver for another 4 years. As Bree said, I was just his wife trying to help him heal and do everything I could to try to take care of him. Like many, he was inspired to join the Marine Corps after the attacks on September 11th. And he did sustain combat-related injuries while serving in Iraq, which progressed in severity over time to the point that he could no longer maintain his employment. So I got a job working nights while he and our young children slept, then worked as his unpaid caregiver during the day and the kids, and just squeezed in naps wherever I could. I don't remember a whole lot about that time of my life because I was exhausted all the time. I was stressed all the time. I was alone and I had no resources. After 15 months of barely scraping by, my husband's benefits did finally kick in, which helped relieve a lot of our financial burden, but not all. There were and still are huge gaps that are difficult to fill on our fixed income, especially where our children and myself are concerned. Not all disabled veteran dependents qualify for medical insurance coverage. And even if they do, there's still large out-of-pocket expenses, especially for those with underlying health conditions. And then vision and dental coverage are not provided at all. A huge worry I share with many caregivers across the board is the impact my caregiving role has on my ability to earn outside income or provide for my family if and when something does happen to my husband, or if I no longer qualify for certain veteran programs, as anywhere from some to all of our benefits will just disappear. Working nights on top of my beyond full-time job as a caregiver is also no longer an option, as my husband's health issues have progressed to the point that he now requires around-the-clock care and supervision. He needs help with activities of daily living, all of his instrumental activities of daily living, and he requires consistent physical active interventions to prevent falls. There are some amazing staff and resources for veteran caregivers through the VA. Counseling, support, my favorite is whole health. Those are all provided, but things like stipends are very hard to qualify for, even if the veteran requires that around-the-clock care. Even then, if you do qualify, there are still huge gaps that create an even deeper financial burden that is hard to fill on the veteran benefits alone. In my experience, financial stipends for family caregivers is one of the best ways to help ease caregiver burden and stress. Studies show that a well-supported caregiver is the single most important factor to a veteran's well-being. Caregivers are in the home. They are the first line of defense, and they know their veterans better than anyone. Providing access to training, respite, health insurance, financial stipends, and other programs are vital to military and veteran caregivers as they quietly fulfill their important role of caring for those who gave so much for our country. Providing these resources allows the service member to remain in the home for as long as possible, creating a better quality of life and better health outcomes. It's also way more cost effective than admitting them to those high cost government funded institutionalized care facilities. Bottom line, it is just so much cheaper to support the caregiver so they can continue to care for their veteran. Each caregiver story is unique, but all carry the same threads of stress, financial strain, caregiver burnout, isolation, lack of support, lack of training, lack of respite, and lack of resources. Most community programs exclude military and veteran caregivers and families because a lot of people, even within the civilian caregiver community, assume the VA takes care of all of our needs, but this is not true. Although there are some resources provided through the VA, there's still a lot of work to be done, which is where the Elizabeth Dole Foundation comes in. They are fighting to help fill those gaps, create programs, provide training and respite, among other initiatives. Studies have found there are 5.5 million military and veteran caregivers serving in our country. They are mothers and fathers, siblings, spouses, friends, children, even young children who step in to serve those who served, providing $14 billion a year in unpaid care. Studies show military and veteran caregivers consistently experience more health problems, face greater strains in family relationships, and have more workplace problems than their civilian caregivers. More than a third of them are under the age of 30, which is an important factor to consider regarding long-term financial and legal planning. Caregivers are more susceptible to emotional stress, with some experiencing distress 4 times the rate of our non-caregiver counterparts. Unemployment, underemployment, and missed work days are common issues, resulting in $6 billion of lost productivity each year. Many lack training on how to care for the severe physical wounds and complex invisible injuries sustained by those who serve. The Elizabeth Dole Foundation sees the lack of resources for young children with ill, injured, and wounded service members in their homes. These children face unique challenges that their peers do not. They aren't just regular kids, they are caregivers too. We at the Elizabeth Dole Foundation call them hidden helpers, and they are heroes. The foundation is currently researching the impacts of being a hidden helper and is working to create programs to help alleviate their burdens as well. There are many different types of caregivers, even within the military community. We all have different stories, complex needs, and mountains to climb, but we all have so much more in common than we realize. An important lesson I've learned from both Senators Bob and Elizabeth Dole is when you see something wrong, don't just talk about it, fix it. They have taught us that our differences don't matter, that if we all work together toward the same goal, we can move those mountains together. Senator Elizabeth Dole said, "The foundation's legacy will be a shift in culture, an America where caregivers are empowered, they're appreciated, they're listened to, an America where caregivers are really woven into the very fabric of our nation's appreciation for the military." As a fellow, it's been an honor to see that legacy come to life. Again, thank you for giving us this opportunity to share our stories and including us in this very important conversation.
Thank you so much, Anne. That was powerful and beautiful. And when I think about what our hidden heroes and helpers are holding and carrying, the exhaustion, the stress that you named, the fear about the financial impact and the ability to work and bring home, make ends meet. I just think that the least that we can do as a country is meet our hidden heroes and helpers with a caregiving system that actually supports your needs. And I would love to hear you say a little bit more about why, particularly for the families of veterans, why a better caregiving system is particularly important.
I feel like, especially here in Arizona, it's not hard to find people. I would say a majority, if not all, of people already have that passion for helping veterans. We are all patriotic. We're all, especially after last week's events, just so grateful for the sacrifices that they made, that they put their lives on hold. And it's not just them that sacrifice, it's their families as well. And then when we're lucky enough for them to come home, it doesn't end there. They continue to fight their fight, and then the kids fight that fight, and the wives and the parents and the friends. And it's so important, like I said, to support the caregivers so we can support the veterans so they can begin to heal.
Thank you so much, Anne, and truly to all three of you for sharing your stories with us. And now we have the great honor of being joined by Congressman Greg Stanton, who represents Arizona's 9th District in the United States House of Representatives. Congressman Stanton brings a long record of public service and bipartisanship for Arizona, where he has consistently prioritized investments in our families, in a sustained economy, and in infrastructure that really meets the needs of his constituents. Welcome, Congressman Stanton.
Thank you very much, iGen, for asking me to participate in this important conversation about the care. I hate to use the care economy. I guess just caring people. I'm in politics. Sometimes your faith in humanity is challenged, and now my faith in humanity is restored after hearing those amazing speakers. Destiny, I hope everything is going okay with your kids and family. I guess I'm so sorry that you had to make those very difficult choices at the early days of your children's lives. I'm a parent of 2, and I just couldn't even imagine going through that. So we're sending my best and praying for you, and hopefully doing our best on legislatively to show most support for you and your family. And then Bree and Ann, I mean, that's just, I'm getting a little emotional hearing those stories. I'm thinking about how America is honoring 13 service members that died in the last few days, trying to help people evacuate and change the trajectory of people's lives in a positive way by getting them to a positive experience, as opposed to potentially losing their lives. The service and sacrifice of those folks, and then inspired by the fact that the next day, service women and men go back right to the same spot where their brothers and sisters were killed to do the exact same thing. They are our heroes, and you're heroes too. You're heroes too. I mean, what you're doing to support our service women and men, in this case, your family members that have taken the same risk their own lives in service to their fellow women and men, their fellow Americans. What you're doing is heroic, and I just want to make sure I acknowledge that. I'm going a little off script here, but it reminds me of my own dad. My mother suffered from Alzheimer's for many years, and my dad, he's old school. He wouldn't let anybody else help my mom. The 4 Stanton kids tried when she was going through just unbelievably difficult times. But my dad took care of her every single day until 3 days before she went to heaven. We finally had to put her in hospice, but in so many ways that we took it for granted that he was just going to take care of her. We offered to help, but in so many ways we knew he was going to say no. And we didn't realize the emotional toll that it took on him until after my mom did go to heaven. And we visited the house, and we realized the physical toll that it had taken on him to have to lift her and give her showers and baths. And he never asked for financial support for any of the Stanton kids. We didn't have a lot of money growing up, so they were still living in the same house that I grew up in a kind of a working class neighborhood in Phoenix. But we honestly didn't realize the mental health toll that it took and it took him years. This will be 10 years since she passed this year. It took him years for him to kind of recover emotionally from that experience of being that day-to-day caretaker without a lot of support. And so this is really important, iGen, the work that you and the National Domestic Worker Alliance that you're doing. All of us know family or friends that are doing this work. And again, we probably take it for granted. You've made a very powerful case not just how it helps those individual families, but a very powerful case as to why an investment of the nature that you're seeking is needed for the American economy. That how much it will help not only the caregiving that people deserve, but also help the American economy, because it'll allow people to kind of continue to engage in their own lives and careers, advancing themselves economically, but obviously advancing the American economy. The pandemic obviously has hammered women in particular, single mothers in particular, and we have got to, as we pass these policies through this reconciliation program, adopt policies that recognize that, because that is good for the American economy. It's a talent pool that we are losing by not allowing people to fully be able to participate in the economy, particularly American women, and that is to our great detriment. So I just want to say applaud you, Jen, the work that you are doing. There's a reason why you got that genius grant from the MacArthur Foundation. You deserve it. And I know my friend Monica Trejo from Arizona, I think she's on the call, at least listening. She's representing the Alliance here in Arizona. She's an amazing leader on many different areas, but I just want to recognize her and her leadership as well. I'm proud that Congress during the pandemic did act in the rescue plan with President Biden infusing $12 billion in extra funding for home and community-based services through 2022, $3 billion in mental health and substance use disorder block grants, $2 billion for the Older Americans Act funding to support community-based and in-house services for older adults, people like my mom that my dad took care of for so many years, $150 million for a maternal, infant, and early childhood home visiting program, $100 million in behavioral health workforce education and training grants. That's another area that needs so much additional support. But guess what? We're just getting started, because that was a down payment. But for the American economy to fully thrive, there is a lot more that needs to be done. And that's why in this reconciliation process that we'll be going through in the next few months, working very hard. I serve on the Judiciary Committee and the Transportation Infrastructure Committee. So those will be two key committees, particularly on immigration reform too, which by the way is incredibly important to Arizona, that we include immigration reform in the reconciliation bill. But other things that I know everyone on this call supports: universal pre-K and 3 and 4-year-old early childhood education, paid family and medical leave, making community college paid for so that people that need to advance their life and skills through community college don't have a financial burden of having to take on loans, extending the largest middle-class tax cut in American history, the child tax credit, and reducing prescription drug costs for patients and saving taxpayers billions of dollars. And of course, making this $400 billion investment to support the caregiving infrastructure that is so badly needed, as demonstrated by Destiny and Bree and others that are on this the call. In this plan, Arizona will do very, very well, as we should. Arizona Home and Community-Based Infrastructure would receive $631 million over 10 years, 13,000 direct care jobs. Jen, as you pointed out, we need a lot more than that. We're going to need a lot more than that because of the aging of our community, but that is a good place to start. So as these programs get going, the infrastructure bill continues to move through Congress, we will keep an eye on what's happening to make sure that those who need the help are getting it. And so my office, if anybody has any questions, comments, wants to advocate, call me anytime, 480-824-5616. And I want to thank all of the partner organizations, Caring Across Generations, Senator Elizabeth Dole, her foundation, Elizabeth Dole Foundation, Common Defense, the ARC of Arizona, and of course, the National Domestic Workers Alliance. Your advocacy is making a huge difference. This pandemic's been tough. It has been tough in so many ways, on older Americans, on vulnerable Americans, and of course, our families at home. So thank you for all you're doing to hold it together and to keep our state strong. So thanks, iGen, for letting me participate in this important event.
Thank you so much, Congressman, for your leadership on all of these issues and for joining us today and truly for sharing your personal story. I know it means so much to all of us who have been caregivers and are caregivers to know that you see us and you understand the needs that we have in our families. So I just want to say thank you and see if there's a lot of families of veterans who are watching, military caregivers who are watching today, and just wondered if you have any message for them in this really challenging time.
You know, it's almost anything you say doesn't, you know, meet the moment after what happened just a few days ago. But it's a reminder that the women and men who serve our country, they don't have to. We don't have a draft in the United States of America. These are all volunteers, people that have willingly chosen to serve their country and put their own lives at risk and their safety and security at risk to serve American values. As a country, we need to do such a better job of showing appreciation for those folks. And we know that to have a successful service member, you need support. Support when you're deployed overseas, support when you're deployed here locally, but a service member cannot be fully successful unless they have a support system, most importantly, their family. So our American military system, our defenses are dependent on a family network. And obviously, one thing that has become clear today, and I appreciate, is the need to do more to support those families who are supporting their loved ones and therefore supporting us, all of America, by the work that they do. And so that, you are seen, you are heard, and you are appreciated. And now it's time for the American people through Congress to show our appreciation for you by creating exactly what you are asking for, this care infrastructure. I really just applaud you and need to show it by not just words, but by deeds as well. So thank you for what you do.
Thank you so much, Congressman. We will take your words and carry them with us as hope as we go forward into the future. And I especially want to thank Destiny, Bree, and Anne for sharing your experiences and your incredible leadership on these issues. Thank you so much. And now, yes, thank you, Congressman. We are going to dive into what this opportunity means for Arizona specifically, with a brilliant panel of policy experts. We have with us Rochelle Brill, Senior Policy Analyst at Community Catalyst. We also have with us today Rochelle Beretta, Senior Director of Strategy and Impact at the Elizabeth Dole Foundation. We also have Joanna Jojo Sweat, organizer with Common Defense. And I'm really excited because this is just going to be a brilliant group of leaders. And we also have with us Nicole Jorwick, who is Senior Director of Public Policy at the National Office of the ARC and has been my co-conspirator and comrade in arms throughout this journey. So this is going to be an amazing conversation. Let's start with you, Rochelle. I'd like to begin with just talking about your perspective on this moment, which is a really unique moment for care, and you have a unique perspective. Let's talk about veteran care and how the conversation has evolved recently. How does this need for home and community-based services, which we know is growing for the entire country and for all families, how does this overlap with veteran services?
Well, thank you, and thank you to the storytellers, to Bree and Anne of Dole Care Caregiver Fellows. So it overlaps in a few ways, and first I need to acknowledge that the VA is our country's largest integrated healthcare system. There's over 1,000 healthcare facilities. There's 171 medical centers and over 1,000 outpatient settings. And so, you know, when we think about that, we also have to recognize that the VA has been able to be an innovator. And one of the VHA's, the Veterans Health Administration's innovations, was the creation of a home-based primary care. So there's a lot that the VA has been able to initiate, and then it's been taken up on the civilian side. That still doesn't mean the VA gets everything right. It's a large, complicated system. Recognizing first that they have done the research, they have done the pilots, and they've rolled out programs that get adopted on the civilian side. So, you know, what we know about the home-based service.
I think we've temporarily, Rachel, maybe frozen. Let's see if we can get her back. Let's give it one more second. Maybe we can move to Jojo and then Rachel can finish when she comes back. Jojo, could you build off of what Rachel started to lay out and just share a little bit about how the Build Back Better agenda could change the situation for Arizona veterans?
Yeah, definitely. So not every veteran's experience with the VA is the same. And we have over 4.7 million veterans with service-connected disabilities. And whether that's from a combat-related incident or not, can sometimes determine how veterans are treated within that healthcare system and what resources that are offered or available to them. A big factor of me being a part of Common Defense is our equity and inclusion of all veterans from all generations, different sex, honoring women who serve as well. And there are a lot of complexities with that. Still, with the civilian society, understanding what it means to be a service member or what their idea of a service member is. And the same with people who are employed by the VA and facilitate those programs. I've worked in advocacy for veterans over the last 10 years, and I can't tell you how many disabled women veterans have told me that they're just flat out told no, that they don't qualify for a system that is seemingly taxed within the VA already. And so because they don't look like what they believe somebody to receive caregiver services should be, they're not offered or they're told they don't qualify. By offering this funding and expanding that, we are creating broader availability to a broader audience of people that actually need these resources, whether it's for a short-term period in their life or whether it's long-term and lasting for the sustainability of their life. The spectrum of care should be so broad that access is achievable by anybody who can qualify for that without having to go through, a minefield to get that access. A big problem in Arizona too is we've had a taxed VA system. We have over 600,000 veterans living in just Maricopa County alone. So you can imagine in a state where we don't even have adequate VSO representation, which allows a veteran to get that qualifying disability, on why having limited caregiver resources then becomes even a worse scenario. And families get pushed back really far on their economic trajectory. And we just need to be able to, as a country, give dignity back to anybody and show that we value them, however they may contribute and how much in their abilities that they can, especially with the veteran community who, like Congressman Stanton mentioned, are a volunteer force. They raised their right hand, they swore an oath, and they made those sacrifices. And we need to ensure that that access is available to that 4.7 million service-connected disabled community.
Thank you so much for offering that context, Jojo. So helpful. And Rachel, it looks like we have you back. Do you want to finish your thought?
Yes, thank you. I think the important thing for us to recognize is the complexity of the VA, the innovations of the VA. I also want to note there's a program called PACE, which the VA has adopted. It's a no wrong door program, and there's the Southern Arizona VA healthcare system offers this program. The challenge we have, though, is that sometimes the care gets delivered based on age. So there are a number of supports in the VA for geriatric patients and for folks who have suffered catastrophic illnesses, injuries, and are requiring full-time round-the-care support with their ADLs. It's what Bree and Ann spoke about. It's the invisible injuries. It's the traumatic.
It wouldn't be a proper Zoom if we didn't have some form of technical difficulties. So while we try to get Rachel back, I'm gonna invite Nicole into this conversation. If you could offer some of your perspective of somebody who works day in and day out with a community of people with developmental and intellectual disabilities, why this investment in home and community-based services is so essential to the community in Arizona.
Yeah, I'm really glad to be here on behalf of the ARC and also the ARC of Arizona and the exec John Myers there to talk about why this is so important for people with IDD or intellectual and developmental disabilities. And it's really interesting hearing from all Common Defense and the Elizabeth Dole Foundation, and because I think what the tie-in is that whether it's Medicare or veterans benefits, a lot of people don't realize what they don't have access to until the moment that they need it. And I think Representative Stanton's personal story also kind of spotlighted that issue. And that's certainly true for people with disabilities and their family caregivers. We know that this investment that we're trying to get, the $400 billion, would provide these home and community-based services to almost 40,000 new individuals. And those even people who have services don't necessarily have every service that they need. But for people with disabilities, that can mean working. A lot of folks don't realize how much employment supports for people with disabilities are funded by Medicaid home and community-based services. That's obviously true for people with IDD, it's true for veterans, it's true for other groups. We need to make sure that that due to decades of lack of investment, that's why we need this huge investment. But it's ultimately going to impact Arizonans in a really strong and important way, because when you're providing HCBS to those 40,000 additional people, you're not just supporting those people. You're supporting the family caregivers who are filling in the gaps in services. You're also, this funding would not just create more services, it would also provide better pay for the direct care workforce, which is incredibly important. Myself as a family caregiver understands why the peace of mind that a well-paid and well-trained direct care workforce, that's not just meaning that the family caregivers aren't providing the services. Obviously some will choose to and they should be allowed to, but they should also be paid, right? So by investing in that workforce, you're also making sure that the numbers are 12,432 Arizona family caregivers can return to work or secure new jobs. Also, people with disabilities, some of those 40,000 people getting services, that will also mean that they will get jobs. the economy building nature of this bill, I think, is something that we don't necessarily talk about enough, but it's really true, whether it's family caregivers, the beneficiaries of HCBS, or obviously a robust direct care workforce. All of that will come together, and that's really why we need to see this investment, and it will be incredibly important to Arizonans and people with disabilities all over the country.
Thank you so much, Nicole. Really, really helpful. Rochelle, can you break down for us how the federal policy and what's just being discussed in Congress relates to the specific state situation in Arizona?
Yes, thanks, Ijen. I think what's been made clear today by all of our speakers is that Arizona has some really, really strong caregivers, but what they really need and deserve is a strong care infrastructure. And there's this opportunity right now that Nicole just explained to make not just Arizona's community-based care system, but the whole country's even stronger by supporting the individuals who receive home and community-based services, their family caregivers, and their home care worker caregivers, give them the system that they deserve. And that's why the opportunity we have now at the federal level is so important to make that happen.
Thank you so much. I think that's absolutely right. And Rachel, I was wondering if we have you back yet, if you wanted to just say a few words to make sure that we're understanding the full picture here for veteran caregivers.
Yes, thank you. So the full picture is, because of the recent events in Afghanistan, our caregiver family is going to welcome new members. We've learned of folks who are already at Walter Reed. I don't know the severity of their injuries or the type of their injuries. We certainly are likely to see some trauma, stress trauma related to the service. So we have made inroads, certainly, into designing systems of care that are going to be supporting these families coming home, coming into the system now. But we need to make sure that they recognize that they identify as caregivers, and then are able to access the supports that are out there from the VA, from the Elizabeth Dole Foundation, from many other organizations that have been created to support the military and veteran caregiving community. We know one thing: you can make great strides when you are in the community of your peers, and I think that is where we need to put some more power into more supports and more training, because the folks who've had this experience firsthand are the ones who are going to be able to bring the message home and make the changes that we need. These include legislative changes, policy changes within the VA, and of course, a welcoming community.
Absolutely. Thank you so much I think that's a wonderful note to close on. We have to listen to the people whose direct experiences are the reality in this country. And we've heard from Destiny, we've heard from Bree and Anne about what it's like to not have a strong care infrastructure to support our families and our caregivers, and just how urgent and important it is. And the beautiful thing is we have an opportunity right now before us to transform the kinds of support we're able to offer family caregivers, professional care workers, and all of the individuals and people that we love who need this support and these services. The time is now, and there's a huge amount at stake for the state of Arizona, where there's clearly a desperate and urgent need for these services and this infrastructure. I want to thank all of our panelists for shedding light on this. I want to thank all of our co-sponsoring organizations and our storytellers for contributing to this event today. And I want to hand it back over to Shantae Wolf of Caring Across Generations to help wrap us up.
You know, now more than ever, Congress must seize the unprecedented opportunity to make care jobs good jobs and provide critical support to millions of American families who rely on HCBS. And each of us have a role to play in making that happen. During today's roundtable, we heard several themes that ultimately boil down to we don't see ourselves a lot of times in issues until it's at our front doorstep. It's time to change that. Our home hidden heroes have often been the forefront of our conversations, from the pandemic to our economy, and it's time to put them first in a proactive way instead of being reactive. So we have a lot going on. What you would like to do in your communities is the first step. At home is the first step when you make the calls to our senators and to say, hey, care is not only infrastructure, it's mandatory for everyone in America. And this is how you get started. Plug into our federal HCBS petition. We're at caringacross.org/HCBS. We've sent tons of emails across the country to several senators because we know that it's now or never. Our families deserve the care that they should have received yesterday. However, better late than never. And what better way to start than getting involved with us? I'm Shantae Wolf, Caring Across Generations Campaigns Director, and thank you for joining us today.